Who are the top 10 wrestlers of all time who never held that World Championship in the WWF/WWE? That's what my video today is going to be about, and this is my top 10 list. So let's get straight into it with number 10, Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, one thing that Jake the Snake had going against him was the fact that he came up in a time where you had guys like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Ric Flair, The Undertaker. The Undertaker was just fresh at the time, new character, but you had all these guys, and you had the Ultimate Warrior as well at the same time. So Jake Roberts was a bit crowded out, but the guy was such a good promo cutter, and he was the best heel in pro wrestling, I believe, in 1991, when he was going through that thing with Randy Macho Man Savage, and he had the snake bite him. Do you remember that? That's such a, that's the biggest heel thing I've ever seen in pro wrestling. That'll never be beaten, I don't think. So yeah, he was the best heel in pro wrestling, and considering the fact that he was going through that storyline in 1991 to 1992 with Macho Man Randy Savage, where they were bitter rivals, and then at WrestleMania 8, which is in 1992, Macho Man was headlining the card as world champion. That could have so easily have been Jake Roberts versus the Macho Man for the world title, and then you had Undertaker ended up beating Jake Roberts on that card. But that could have been the main event with Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan. Imagine that. Imagine how better that WrestleMania would have been if that was the card rather than Ric Flair against Savage, which was alright. But you had Hogan against Sid, which didn't really make sense. Well, it didn't make sense in the grand picture of things. It was all built up for Flair Hogan, but they didn't pull the trigger on it for whatever reason. Number 9 on my list, Roddy Piper. Now, I'm not a big fan of Roddy Piper. I understand how good he was, but I'm not one of these who will constantly champion him as the guy who is the #1 guy who should have held the world title, as I saw on the Bleacher Report. Because before I did my video, I thought I'd do a bit of research in case I missed anyone out off my list, and he was #1 on their list, and I thought I don't really agree with that, because he was never really the guy, I didn't think. And reading his book, he just always seemed like a guy who just looked into sports, and luckily ended up against Hogan at WrestleMania 1 and opposing him. I'm not saying he was bad or anything, because he was really good at what he did, but I don't think he was heavyweight title material. But again, he was such a big character, and the fans were really behind him, especially when he's a face. Again, going back to 1992, when he finally won his first ever singles title in the WWF, the Intercontinental Championship off the Mountie at the Royal Rumble 1992. And then later on in the show, he entered the Rumble when the world title was on the line in the Rumble, and everyone was going mental, like, oh my god, Roddy Piper's going to win, he's going to win both titles in one. I remember me watching it for the first time, oh my god, this guy's going to win it. And yeah, Roddy Piper, the fans were totally behind him at the time, but yeah, he's another guy who could have easily been given the world title. Number 8 on my list is Rick Rude. This guy managed to pull a good feud out of the Ultimate Warrior. That was very, very rare. Not many people managed to get good feuds and even good matches out of the Warrior, but Rick Rude managed to do that. He was, again, a great character, a great heel. The reason why I put him above Jake Roberts is that he just seems like more of a world champion, and Jake Roberts had his demons and whatnot, so I thought I'd put Jake Roberts like number 10 in the list and not too low, because that is an argument against him, saying no, we can't really trust him with the world title, and plus he had his career shortened because he had his demons. Rick Rude also had his career shortened because of a back injury, but still he was around for longer, and he did end up getting the, what's it called, the international title when Ric Flair finally, again in 1992, when Ric Flair left the WCW with the world title, they made an international title to take its place, and Rick Rude was the holder of that for some time, I believe. I think he beat Sting for it. Number 7 on my list is, so yeah, Rick Rude's basically had a world title, but not in the WWE. Number 7 on my list is Faarooq Ron Simmons. Now, he won the NWA title, and I think he might have won it from Lex Luger, but he never won the title in the WWE. Now, a lot of WWE fans will be saying, especially people who grew up around the same time as me, will be saying, no, Faarooq should have never won the title. And I would be one to agree with you, apart from the fact that I'm going back over all the shows from 1997 at the moment, and all the way through to the end of the Invasion angle, and that's where I'm at the moment. 1997, as you can tell with my review series that we'll get back up shortly. I've almost finished watching, what is it, Dawn Before Bad Blood, Ground Zero. I've almost finished watching that. But yeah, Faarooq should have got the title, I believe, at King of the Ring 1997 when he went against the Undertaker, and he was like, it was such a hot storyline at the time. They'd never had a black world champion at the time either, so Faarooq could have really took advantage of that and given the title, let him run with the ball because he was in a hot storyline with the Nation domination. But they didn't. They had the Undertaker beat him, and I think it was a rubbish match from what I remember. I reviewed it, so if you want to find out my proper thoughts on that match, go back and watch my King of the Ring 1997 review, which is on my channel. But yeah, Faarooq's a guy who should have had the title. Number 6, Lex Luger. Again, a guy who held the NWA and WCW world title, but he never held that WWF or WWE world title, and he was being built up for it in 1994, wasn't it, with the Lex Express and all that. For those of you who don't know, basically Lex Luger had come over from WCW, and he started off as a heel, but Vince McMahon wanted to make him into the next Hulk Hogan, so he started really pushing him, and he gave him this tour bus, and basically Lex Luger, they called it the Lex Express, and Lex Luger went all around and basically promoted himself as the new American hero, and he used to wear like jogging bottoms that were like in the colours of the American flag, with like one leg was blue with white stars and the other one was white and red stripes or whatever the colour of the flag is. And yeah, they even built him up to slam Yokozuna. It was the Hulk slamming Andre moment. It was on July 4th as well, again bigging up the all-American, new American hero sort of gimmick. Get this big foreigner Yokozuna, supposed to be this big Japanese monster, the world champion, and then it's on some cruise ship, some battleship apparently, and then Luger slams him on July the 4th, and it's a massive deal because he'd got American footballers and who else to try and slam Yokozuna, but nobody could. Yeah, so Ric Flair, number 6 on the list. He was really ready for it at the time. I believe they should have given it to him, but again, you had guys like Bret Hart at the time. This is why a lot of these other guys have fallen. Sorry, mumbling my words here. This is where a lot of these guys are falling down, is because they're around at the same time as better candidates. But the thing is, Luger was a better candidate than Yokozuna in my opinion, so he could have easily had the title rather than Yoko. Next up on my list is Curt Hennig. Curt Hennig was such a good wrestler. Bret Hart has said on many occasions that Curt Hennig is the best wrestler that he ever wrestled against, and you know that's as high as praise as you can get, really, isn't it? Great character, great charisma, can talk on the mic. He was basically the total package. That name was given to Lex Luger, but Lex Luger wasn't the total package. Curt Hennig was the total package, but they called him Mr. Perfect, and that name again fit perfectly. Pardon the pun. But yeah, he's a guy they could have given the world title to. The thing is, there was never really a time for Curt to take the title, because he was towards the end of his WWF run, he was injured all the time. And then when he came back, his time was over basically. So yeah, he sort of didn't really come at the right time. Yeah, he was the AWA world champion for a while, but the AWA, again, if you ask most current wrestling fans, you ask them about the AWA, they have no idea. But I personally have very little knowledge about the AWA, so the just general fan will have no idea about like the NWA, so that title really doesn't really count at the end of the day. 4 on my list is Owen Hart. Now, I've put Owen Hart on this list, and at number 4, I really wanted to have him low because he's the guy who I always think of should have had the world title. And there's a specific occasion when I think he should have been given the world title, and that was it SummerSlam 1994? When Bob Backlund beat Bret Hart for the WWF World Championship, and Bob Backlund was well past it at this time. His character was very outdated. He was outdated even when he was in his prime. His character wasn't that interesting then, but his character was so outdated at the time. And I'm not here to bash Bob Backlund, because I respect what he did for the wrestling business, and I always liked the newer character he had in TNA, where he was like this kooky Mr. Backlund character and he could snap at any second. It was sort of funny, but at the same time it wasn't new world title material. It's sort of like a Santino gimmick or like an Eric Young sort of thing, just to make you laugh on the side. Owen Hart should have had that world title win off Bret Hart. He should have won the title off Bret Hart and then dropped it to Diesel like Bob Backlund did, because Backlund was just a transitional champion. They could have given that run to Owen Hart, but they didn't do it for some reason. Whatever the reason it was, they decided not to go with him, and I think he should have got it, because at the end of the day, he was just as good as Bret Hart on his day. And I firmly believe that. There's lots of matches of, well, not lots of matches, but they had about 5 or 6 key matches in the WWF. They had the WrestleMania 10 match. They had the SummerSlam that was SummerSlam 94 when it was him against, I think it was Survivor Series when Backlund beat Bret, but SummerSlam 1994 was a cage match between Owen and Bret. They also had a match, I can't remember what the show was called, it was like called Warzone or something like that. It was just an added on show that sort of like Superstars is now, or just like an added show that isn't the main show. And they were on the very first one to sort of put it over, to sort of say, right, you're going to get good action on this show. And that match was so good, Brett versus Owen. Again, I've said it before in this video, I've said it in other videos, and I'll say it again in videos in the future. But yeah, Owen Hart as good as Bret Hart on his day. Number 3, the British Bulldog. Now, again, another member that extended Hart family. Never won a world title anyway, I believe. Not even in, well, I don't think he ever wrestled in the NWA or in the AWA. He just came from Calgary, didn't he? The thing with the Bulldog is that he was so popular in England, and they could have really pushed him as that international superstar. Because when they came over here to Wembley and they did SummerSlam 1992, he headlined the show with Bret Hart and he won, and the crowd went absolutely insane for him. And that was just the IC title. Imagine if they gave him the world title that day. If they give him against Savage, that probably wouldn't have been as good as him versus Bret, because Bret really got the best out of him. Not to say that Savage isn't as good as Bret, well, I don't think he is, but Savage is really good, but Bret's just the best ever in my opinion. Apart from maybe he who must have not been in, but no, I don't think he's even as good as Bret. But yeah, Bulldog got really stiffed in my opinion. Again, he had drug problems, so he was getting thrown out of the WWE constantly, and then he'd come back in, then he'd leave again, then he'd come back in, and he had a back injury that he got in WCW. But in 1992 SummerSlam, when he won that title, the IC title, he was as popular as anyone else in the wrestling industry, so he could have easily been given the world title at that time, but they didn't pull the trigger on him, did they? Number 2, Scott Hall. Now he's another one who, just like Jake the Snake Roberts, he's got his demons, so he was probably never trustworthy enough to give the world title to. But when I first started watching wrestling in 1993, up until the time that he left WWF in 1996, he was my favourite wrestler. Scott Hall was fantastic, and I'm sure a lot of kids my age were in the same boat saying that Scott Hall is the favourite wrestler. So the fact that they never give the title to him is quite disappointing, isn't it, in my opinion? He also never got it in WCW. I think he should have at least got it in WCW. The way they were banding it around to like pretty much everyone by the end of it, it's a shame that Scott Hall was in the position he was at the end of his WCW run, where he was just so addled with his demons and whatever, that he was in definitely not a place to be trusted with the world title. So yeah, Scott Hall is number 2 on my list, because he was a great wrestler, he had a great look, he could really talk, good gimmick, connects with the fans. That's what all these guys do. All these guys who have got on my list, they all connect with the fans. Maybe not so much Lex Luger though, to be honest. Lex Luger didn't really connect as much as the others, but the rest really did connect. Especially my number one guy who should have had the world title but never did. They never pulled the trigger on him, and that is Ted DiBiase Sr. Ted DiBiase, again, I said it with Jake the Snake Roberts from 1991. Ted DiBiase was the biggest heel in pro wrestling in the late 80s. He was such a good heel, especially in mainstream wrestling, WWF. Maybe in NWA, Ric Flair might have been better because he was going through territory to territory defending the title, putting on these 60-minute matches, cocky guy or limousine riding and all this bullshit. But Ted DiBiase was such a good heel, that $1 Million Man character where he had Virgil protecting him, and Virgil was supposed to be this tough guy who could basically protect Ted from anything. And then he bought the title off Andre the Giant when Andre the Giant beat Hulk Hogan. Andre was going to be on my list, but because he beat Hulk Hogan for the title, I thought, nah, I won't put him on there. He actually had the title for a bit, and he sold the title to Ted DiBiase, but Ted DiBiase was stripped of it straight away. And then they had a tournament at WrestleMania 4, which Macho Man Randy Savage won. Now, I'm all for Savage winning that, but the fact that he won that and he also won the title at WrestleMania 8 off Ric Flair, it's just, I don't know, I think it's a bit, not pointless, because he obviously deserved the title, but the fact that Ted DiBiase never won it, the fact that Jake the Snake never won it, and they could have both easily won it at either of those times, it's just a clear indication that WWE, they like to stick with guys they can trust, and I can understand that, but I've given you 10 good examples here of guys who could have been given the titles and could have been given a chance to run with it, but they just never were. And Ted DiBiase, again, like I've been saying over and over, such a good heel and such a good worker in his prime. Go back and watch his stuff from his days in the WWF. I keep getting confused. WWF, WWE, it's the same thing, isn't it? I was always one of those who continued to call it WWF up until a few years ago, and I've just keep calling it the WWE, but it doesn't sound right talking about Ted DiBiase working in the WWE, because I just think of his son who's nowhere near as good. But yeah, Ted DiBiase, my number one on my list. I will quit blabbering on now. Please let me know what you think of my list. Let me know who your list would be. Who would you say are the guys who should have been given the world title but never were given the world title? Put it down in the description box. I say that all the time. And put it in the comment section down below and let me know. That rhymed. I'm a poet, and I never knew I was. That didn't. Yeah, so let me know who you think the guys were who should have been given the world title but they were never given that chance. I'm talking specifically about WWF. If you have comments on other guys who never got a world title anywhere, maybe it's a guy from Japan, maybe it's a guy from the Indies, maybe it's a guy from WCW, ECW, never got that chance, put it down in the comment section below and let me know, and we'll start a chat about it, and we'll yeah, because I like to start a discussion on these videos, as I say all the time. So yeah, let me know down here. If you've got any questions for my Q&A, please drop them into my moderator. People keep asking me them like everywhere else, and I sort of get like lost and like I'll forget about them by the time I get to my Q&A basically. And I want to do one pretty soon, and I've only got about 6 questions in there at the moment, so if someone wants to go and drop a lot of questions in there, that's fine by me, and I'll answer them sometime this week. And yeah, that's me out. Thank you for watching, and if you want, subscribe up there. See you later.